everyone. My name is Harika Okcun, and I did my country profile on Turkey. I am actually from there, so I thought it would be ideal for me to dive deeper and give my personal insights about each topic that I will be discussing in a moment. Agenda for today that we are going to be focusing on for Turkey is going to be the history, population, geography, culture, art and society, language, religious practices, legal practices, political practices, technology, infrastructure and public safety, time zone, gender inequalities, racism, personal liberties, corruption, and bribery. Get into it. So, the history, population, and geography. So, Turkey was founded in 1923 as an offspring of the Ottoman Empire. Istanbul and the Asia Minor was reconstructed as the Republic of Turkey under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. Mustafa was able to disestablish Islam, the religion, as the country's main focus and adopt Western legal codes and education systems. The current population is 80.81 million. And then the geography of Turkey consists of Asia Minor with a small portion of Europe. And Turkey has 4,454 miles of coastline, which I will talk a little bit more later on how they use that coastline, as a way to generate income. The interior consists of mountains, hills, valleys, and high central plateaus. Culture of Turkey. Turkey is a mixture of both classical European and Islamic principles. So there are extremes to both liberal and conservative mindsets depending on which state that you live in. The more closer you get to the Middle East, such as the border of Syria or Iraq, then the more stricter those areas tend to be in terms of Islamic principles. So the culture of Turkey is very diverse depending on the location that you are. Even the cuisines, depending on the state, is very different. The more staple cuisines that we have that you guys might know of is baklava or Turkish coffee. So let's talk about art now. Graphic artists versus traditional craft artists. So graphic artists tend to rely more on major corporations or upper class to buy their work. These artists tend to come from the middle or large cities, as artistry isn't really considered a job in Turkey, especially in the countrysides. These are more like hobbies and stuff like that, not really a career. So traditional artistry tends to have a broader market in Turkey because they sell traditional artworks such as ceramics, rugs, kilns, brass, copper ornaments, and embroideries. And then I also wanted to talk about performing arts because that's actually something that everybody knows in Turkey. It's very common. You can see in this picture right here, you wear traditional clothes, you dance to traditional music, and it's portrayed almost everywhere during holidays. Now we're going to talk about the societal differences. We're going to dive deeper into parental, gender, and schooling. So parental, mother and father figures, they're a little bit more different than the United States. Not too much, though. So mothers tend to be more protective, generally loving and nurturing. They tend to be more of housewives that take care of their elders and children. And especially if you give birth to a son, it increases her societal status. And another thing about parents is that they will not let you go until you get married. So basically, if you're even 30 or 40 years old, you're still living with your parents, basically. Father figures, they tend to be more authoritarian disciplines. They usually tend to be the breadwinners of the family, and public affection isn't really shown towards their kids. It's very little, if so. Are brought up is a little bit different based on the gender as well. So boys are expected to be brave as lions, especially after their circumcision, between the ages of 9 and 12. They tend to have more freedom, get to go out more, enjoy life. And girls, they tend to be more modest. They are skilled at domestic tasks such as cooking and cleaning, and they're supposed to be supportive of the males. And then when it comes to elder siblings, they also take on more parental responsibility as they get older. So the younger child will call them a respectable name, and respect their elder sibling. Also, when it comes to schooling, it's a little bit more different too. They tend to wear uniforms everywhere, whether it's private or public schooling, and then children tend to be required to go to school until age 14. So, the main language in Turkey is Turkish. Students, though, are brought up to learn English from kindergarten all the way going to college. So, if you ever want to travel to Turkey, don't worry about the language barrier. There won't be one, I promise. And there is a large population of Kurds in the southeastern part of Turkey, so they do speak Kurdish as well. So the alphabet, when you look at it, there are an additional alphabets in there. Like, for example, you see over here, there's two C's. This first one is che, and then the second one is J. So there's a little bit of a difference in alphabet compared to the United States, but it's very easy actually to learn Turkish, because basically it's spelled how you would read it and say it, so people don't have a hard time grasping the language. I actually have a friend that just by watching Turkish operas and shows and stuff like that, she was able to learn Turkish, and she's from Morocco. So I hope if you guys ever need help for some reason trying to learn Turkish, I'm always here. Practices of Turkey. So the main religion is Muslim. 98% of Turkey is Muslim. The rest is atheist or agnostic. And then 80 to 85% is Sunni, and then 15 to 20% is Shiite. Most Turks fast during the time of Ramadan and sacrifice sheep, cows to feed the poor and their neighbors at the end of Ramadan. They have a huge celebration and it's great. And then also Turks tend to, if they have the funds, of course, they tend to pilgrimage to Mecca, because it is their duty as Muslims to go and visit there at least once in their lifetime. Islam also plays an important role during important events such as birth, circumcision, marriage, and funerals. Now let's get into the legal practices. Legal personnel in Turkey is called jandarma, which functions as the Turkey's national police. They consist of 70,000 active units and 50,000 reservists. The judicial task of jandarma is guarding prisons, preparing for trials, and assisting in investigations. They also help the military when need be due to the martial law. They are actually a single decentralized police force force, which basically means that they're a single police force that looks at multiple laws from different sections of the government. Also, social legal equalities. So here there is going to be some inequalities, which is the children and then the LGBTQ members. So children are actually tried as adults in Turkey, but they're actually working on trying to change that right now. And then the LGBTQ community is actually forbidden in the religion and laws and customs. So judges might not even look into the case when it involves these members. So crime rates in Turkey is actually quite low compared to other countries. There are 38 out of 82 countries in the highest crimes, and their biggest crime is drug trafficking, which is something that most countries deal with nowadays. And punishments. So basically, the punishment of death penalty ended in 1991 to lifetime imprisonment, but it tends to average around 20 years is the maximum amount that people tend to stay in prisons in Turkey. There are three categories of prison, or the legal practices in general. So there are strict imprisonments, which tend to be like small cells that people stay in. They can't really get out. It's very secure type of thing. And then they have ordinary imprisonments and then heavy fines as well. Looking at the political parties. So, governance. Turkey runs as a Republican parliament democracy, and they also have the three branches that we do have in the United States: the legislative branch, which for them it consists of 550 members, judicial branch, and then the executive branch. Right now, their current president is Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and their current primary ministry is Ahmet Davutoğlu. And then their elections are similar to the United States, with that you need to be 18 years or older to vote. But the president does serve 5 years rather than 2 years in the United States. And then the president is elected by popular vote rather than constitutional of parliament. Technology in Turkey, actually, it is quite advanced over there due to the young population seeking for technology growth. Half of the country is actually under the age of 30. 84% own mobile devices. They're actually third in the world to use mobile devices for e-commerce. And Turkey has more Facebook users than France or Germany. As you can see, the technology growth here is present and will continue to grow if you are planning to do a business in Turkey. Focus on the infrastructure and public safety. So Turkey is considered an emerging market. However, their infrastructure is well developed compared to most countries. So they have over 100 airports, and 20 of them are international. The country's economic dependency is mainly on the marine and fishing fleets, due to 70% of their borders being on the coastline. And then the national rail system is the least developed in the country. 20% is only electrified, so the rest is not. Politicians aren't really interested in improving these areas. And you can see much of the innovation and improvements are mainly focused in Istanbul, due to it being the largest city with more than 14.4 million people. Also, public safety. I would say avoid the areas that are near the Syrian border to avoid terrorism if you are planning to travel there. Stay more in the touristy areas, the larger cities such as Ankara, Istanbul, Izmir, and you can do more research on this area if you plan on going. But mainly, like, near the oceans and stuff like that, you are totally fine. Just don't go next to the southeastern border. The current time zone of Turkey is actually Turkey time, TRT. Coordinated Universal Time is +3. So a little bit about their time zone. They are ahead of us currently by 8 hours. They stopped changing their daylight saving times. Usually they're around 7 hours, but since like a couple of years back, they stopped doing the daylight saving time. So that's a unique fact that they have. Also, another unique fact is that they use military time to talk about it. So they'll say at 18 o'clock we'll meet or something like that. Gender inequalities. There is still in Turkey a presence of gender inequalities. Boys and girls are brought up differently. I can tell you from my standpoint, my brother was more free. He had more time to go out with his friends. And I was more homesy. I had to be with my mom and learn how to cook, which is actually the traditional values that are described in the second point, where women are expected to do more domestic work like sewing and cooking and stuff like that. And then male also, it's more dominant in high status occupations such as business or military. But we do see improvement, as you can see in this graph right here. So going on from 2012 all the way to 2018, the lighter orange is where there is lower inequalities, and then the darker orange is going to be higher inequalities. So you can see how the lighter orange starts to appear more, and I think that's just because people know that this is a wrong thing to do based on just the gender. Racism in Turkey. Yes, there is racism in Turkey, even though most do not admit it. There is racism for Kurdish people, Roman people, and then Syrian refugees. But this is not limited list. There is multiple people. These are just off the top of my mind what I could think of. So some of the reasons why these people are hated. So basically, Kurds are hated by the government and civilians due to the affiliation of violence and terrorism. There's still a great deal of discrimination as their languages cannot be taught in schools at all. For the uprising kids. Romans are dark-skinned individuals, and they tend to be seen as less humane due to their preference and living style. And that's very stereotypical way of thinking of them. And then the Syrian refugees, they were accepted by the government. However, some civilians had issues with this, so they created scenes and violence because they were taking their jobs, etc. And that's pretty much it. Personal liberty. So you really don't have the freedom of speech that you do here in the United States, unfortunately. You really need to be careful of what you post on the social media apps and stuff like that, especially if it involves the government or politics. It could result in you going into jail or prison. And websites do get blocked in Turkey. So at one point, Turkey and Twitter, one of the more common social media apps, have been blocked. And right now, I believe they have 40K other websites that are blocked. You can look at this little image right here. This is how the Turkish government basically acts. It says, as we must now turn our attention to Turkey, and then they click it off. So basically, if some problems arise or something like that, they tend to just shut it off, block it completely. Let's talk about corruption in Turkey. 78 least corrupt nation out of 175 countries, which is actually good, showing that they are not as corrupt as I thought they were, at least. Corruption rate is at an average of 59.42% for the years 1995 to 2018. The ultimate highs were actually in 2017, reaching 81, and the ultimate low was in 1995 at 29. Now let's talk about bribery. So Turkey is actually a little bit stuck in the middle between Middle Eastern traditions and then the Western custom adoption. They tend to sometimes accept bribery depending on the location, and then but you really need to be careful. There's really a fine line in different areas of Turkey that accepts it and doesn't accept it. I know that it still does exist because a couple years back from now, one of my friends was not graduating, and his parents offered his professor at the time a laptop or something like that, and he passed with like a C or something like that. So I know that it is still present in these eras, but I don't know to what extent. It's very vague. So this is going to be the end of my presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Researching about my country was amazing. If you guys do have any questions, please comment down below or send me an email. I can give you the true, honest feedback. I know sometimes online it could steer to a certain bias thing, but I will definitely give you my personal experiences and what I've went through as I was a Turkish citizen, um, and I grew up with Turkish traditions, culture, and stuff like that. So please let me know if you guys have any questions, and I hope to see you guys soon. The resources I've used in the presentation, I've also used my personal experiences and what I felt about each topic. So some of the ideas are going to be a little bit skewed towards my bias as well, just to let you guys know.